Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Robert Bellissimo at the Movies, a video podcast where I have in-depth movie reviews with guests, or I bring on guests who work in the arts and I interview them about their life and career. And today I have Lawrence Grobel, who has written 30 books, 6 books of which are conversation books, with the likes of Truman Capote, Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, Robert Evans, Ava Gardner, and James A. Michener. He's written for several magazines: Playboy, The New York Times, Newsday, Rolling Stone, and James Carroll Oates dubbed him the Mozart of interviewers.
Joyce Carol Oates.
Oh, I'm sorry, Joyce. Joyce Carol Oates. Oh, sorry.
Joyce, yes.
It's a bit of a tongue twister. Dubbed him the Mozart of interviewers. Larry, thanks so much again for doing this today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
This is a personal one for me because I've loved your books for so long. I read the Pacino one, which people can see right above me here. I read that 15 years ago, and then I started to read the Brando one and The Art of the Interview, and so on and so forth. But just to go back, looking back on your life, because you moved from Brooklyn to Jericho, Long Island when you were 9. What did you like more, Brooklyn or Jericho?
Oh, well, they say you're formed in the first 5 or 6 years of your life, right? So I grew up on the streets of Brooklyn. I played stickball in the streets. We set off fireworks on against buildings. We had an archway that we were able to play handball. That was a marvelous time. And I grew up to the sound of falling asleep to the sound of horns honking, in Brooklyn, in Bensonhurst. But then I moved to Long Island at 9.5, and it was a completely different experience. I couldn't sleep for 2 or 3 weeks because all I heard were these crickets or frogs, chirping, and there was no sound. It was a development that was developing. I think there was only 10 houses down before the rest of the development would come later. But I loved Jericho. I mean, Jericho was a terrific place. Once you learn how to ride a bike, you're free. You get on the bike, you go play ball in the schoolyard. You go out with your friends. You have parties. I mean, it was a wonderful, innocent experience, I guess you'd say, compared to what things are like today. And I left there when I was 17.5 to go to UCLA. So I can't say I would, which one was better, because both of them formed me, and for almost the same amount of time. 9 years in Brooklyn, 9 years in Jericho, and then spit out into the world.
And then from there you went to UCLA.
Yeah, I went to UCLA for 4 years. Was not that happy there the first year. You need a car in LA, and I didn't have one.
Right.
And I was living in a dorm, so it was a situation where, I'd like to get down to the beach or something, but I had no mobility. But after I brought back a car the second year, and it was great. I kept moving further away from the university and closer to the beach, and until I was living right on the beach. And I planned my classes around 3 days a week at school, 2 days at home. It was wonderful. And I got a lot out of that, UCLA. And, it was the years when they had the civil rights marches, and I went down to Mississippi for the Meredith, Mississippi March. And I got to write about it. I walked with Dr. King in that march and stuff. And so I was becoming a writer all my life, I think. Since I was in Jericho and 10 years old, I started interviewing some people who live in interesting homes and stuff. So, I just felt at UCLA, that's where I discovered. I had a teacher named Bernard Wolfe. He was a professor, and he was a writer, really, and he was teaching there as a writer in residence. And I had an idea for a novel, and he said, "Well, that's great. Write 100 pages, and if it doesn't work, fuck it." And I never heard that before. It's write 100 pages and then just throw it away. But I did, and I started writing this novel about a young kid who leaves home to go to school, about my life. And after page about 80 and 90, I started running out of things to say. In other words, I didn't have the experience, and I was too young to appreciate the experiences I had already. So I knew that I had to see the world, basically. So when the war came along, I joined the Peace Corps. I went to Africa. I stayed an extra year. I lived there for 3 years. I spent another year traveling around the world, heading to East Africa and then to India and to Nepal, Thailand, Japan. And then, coming back and having a different perspective of what this country is all about. I was gone for 4 years altogether. And so I sort of looked at people who were jumping out of airplanes, for instance. And I thought, no Ghanaian, I lived in Ghana for 3 years, no Ghanaian would jump out of an airplane for the fun of it. They work too hard to get to America to risk killing themselves on an airplane. And I kept thinking about everything I was seeing it was absurd in a certain way from a third world point of view. So I went, and I went to Newsday, and they had a new magazine they were just starting, Sunday Magazine. And so I went in and I said, listen, I won this contest from Newsday some years ago when I was 15 years old. I just been back from Africa. I think I can write for you. And they looked at me like, well, what have you really written? And they said, do you know anything about airplanes? And I said, no, but I can learn. Do you know how to do research? I said, no, but I can find it. I can find out. But I basically was honest with them. And they gave me this assignment to do the history of aviation on Long Island. And it was an amazing history. Just about everything happened on Long Island with aviation, except for the Spirit of St. Louis, in the early years. So I started talking to people who were still alive there. I disappeared for 3 or 4 weeks, and I did all this research, and I wrote this article. And I came back, and I think the editor never expected to see me again. And instead, I got 8 more assignments out of them, and those articles started appearing as cover stories, one every 3 or 4 weeks. So that was amazing. Like all of a sudden I had 8 or 9 cover stories from a new magazine, and I was just starting out. I had no backup credits. So then I thought, maybe I should try to write for the New York Times, not to get a job there, but just to get a credit for it, to be able to put it on a resume kind of thing. So and they accepted a couple of my ideas. So I wrote a few pieces for the Times, and then I did that for, couple other places, and I started then going towards magazines. And the next thing I know, I'm interviewing celebrities, and famous people, and we can get into it, but that's sort of the background.
Yeah, no, I certainly want to get into all that. Just going back a bit, because there's something that I find really interesting about you, Larry, is that even in high school, you excelled so much with your school newspaper and sports, and you were canvassing for a different politician. But then you said you had parents, old-fashioned. They didn't compliment you, when you did something good. Right. So where do you think you had that confidence without parents to say, good job, Larry? Where did the confidence to excel in so much come from?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that, because I always had a positive drive in life. My sister was 2 years older than I was, so she went to college by the time I was a junior in high school. But I don't know. I was the president of my class for 3 years. I was the editor of the newspaper. I had the lead in the one-act play. Terribly. I was on baseball and basketball teams, but I loved high school. I wrote about this in my memoir. I said, people hated high school. They couldn't wait till they got out. Norman Mailer hated it, and Kim Basinger hated it, and Dolly Parton. Everybody wanted to get out and see the world. I just loved it. It was there. So maybe that was what Jericho was like. Maybe it would just allowed me that kind of happiness, of freedom to do whatever I wanted to do, not to be bothered. My parents did not discourage me. They weren't that well read, so I didn't have book discussions with them or anything like that. And the writing that thrilled me, I don't think they ever read, the James Joyce kind of stuff, and Mailer and what have you. But I don't know. I was lucky to have a friend, Paul Singer, whose father was Arthur Singer, and he was a famous bird artist. Very famous. He did the Birds of the World books. He did the 50 stamps U.S. stamp. First time a sheet of stamps had 50 different images on it, and he did that. And his son, Paul's younger brother, did some of the background to it. Paul's mother was an artist. I used to go to their house, and everybody called each other by the first names. I was 12 years old, and they'd ask me my opinion in politics. They'd ask me opinion about what do I thought about, the war, whatever. And I wasn't being asked those kinds of questions in anybody else's house, including my own. But
right.
I was taken seriously, and I liked it. I liked the fact that Arthur Singer was smoking a pipe, sitting in a chair at his desk, and drawing. And this is how he made his living. And it was a great living. And his books were being published. And he was like going around the world doing photographing birds and taking it home. The Museum of Natural History doesn't allow their exhibits out. Arthur was able to get an eagle, or a falcon, a peregrine falcon, whatever it was. And there it would be. I'd go to his house and look, it's right up there. I could touch it, and then they allowed him because of his work. So that impressed upon me a freelance life. I never saw that in my father or anybody else's father. So I was lucky. I was lucky to have at least an idea that it's possible to be your own boss, but you need a talent. That's the other thing you need. And I didn't have any. I had no artistic talent. My sister did. I didn't. I tried playing the piano, but I had no musical talent. So that was I wasn't going to be a concert pianist. I couldn't sing. I didn't feel, I acted a little bit in school, but it didn't catch me. It wasn't like, something I got to do. But I could write a little bit, and I could express myself, and I just found myself able to do that. And when I became the editor of my school paper or whatever, and I would write things, and some people would write letters into the thing about it, commenting, it just encouraged me. And then winning this Newsday history contest when I was 15 years old for a 600-word essay on America's 3 greatest presidents.
Oh, when you met Kennedy, right?
I met Bobby.
When you met Bobby, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he was the Attorney General. We were supposed to meet Jack Kennedy, the president, but he went to Berlin that week. Get that famous Ich bin ein Berliner speech. That was the week that I was in Washington with this group of people who won these Newsday contests. So yeah.
And do you think? I mean, maybe it's hard to say, but because you talked in your book about Arthur Singer and your piano teacher Ted Harris and how much they had an effect on your life. Do you ever look back and wonder whether you would have went down this route if you had not met them?
No, I probably would not have. I probably would have ended up in politics. I think. I guess I would have gone to law school. That was a path towards. I was very interested in politics. I thought, I could be a New York senator or congressman or something. Because I was political in high school, so I knew what it was like to run for office. I knew what dirty tricks were in high school. Right, all high school politicians know dirty tricks. But I worked for this guy Herbert Tenzer for one summer, and we helped him get into office as a congressman. And we saw how, my friend and I, Johnny Crown and I, we were able to, we had control of his office on Long Island. He went to Washington. He was the president of Barton's Candy, I think it was. And we saw how he got in. In his files, it's, there were 3 or 4 people who wanted to run for Congress at the time. And each one was asked, how much money can you give personally? And one guy could put in $15,000, another 20, and Tenzer put in $30,000 or $35,000. He got the nomination, the Democratic nomination. And then we got involved because of the war and all, and we put a youth vote. He was an older man, but we got behind him, and then we met with him. And, we met with him in his backyard one day, because he was voting for the war in Vietnam. He was voting about things that we didn't want him to vote about. And we said, Congressman, you can't vote for he says, listen, boy, I'm new to politics. I'm here. I'm meeting the president, Johnson at the time. And how can I, go against the leader of my party? He knows what he's doing. We said, no, you don't understand. We don't think he does know what he's doing. We don't think anybody involved in this war knows what they're doing by keeping us in the war. and we're the
Right.
ones who are losing our lives. And he didn't change. And we said to him, it was like kind of a threat. We just said, we will not work for you to get reelected if you don't go against Johnson. He did not, and we did not, and we switched over to Allard
Yeah.
Lowenstein, and he won. And he, so we got, it was like a real interesting experience for us. But politics just seemed, it was another lesson learned. I'd rather be a writer if I could. I didn't know I could make it as a writer. Writing was like, to me, the holy grail. I mean, how do you do that? How do you become the writers you've been reading? How does it work? How do you get published? How do you, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anyone who did it. And so, it was like knocking on doors, being naive, maybe going to the New York Times and saying, hey, I can write something for you. Really, I was very on my own when I made the decision that this is what I wanted to do. But it was a decision that was like a dream. It was a fantasy. I didn't know if I could do it. But I think with anything in life, perseverance is the most important thing. If you got to, you just don't give up on the first try. I mean, it's if I would give up on all the people who said no to me when I tried to interview them, I just kept going and going, and finally I wore people down. They said, "Okay, I'll talk to you." But it happens.
Were you always comfortable in uncomfortable situations? Because you talk so much in your books about some of these, fights or confrontations you had. I mean, were you always just very up for that, or did you have to develop that?
Yeah, no. I was always up for the challenge. I always thought the thing about did you have to learn about doing an interview is when you knock on someone's door, when that door opens, you better not expect anything. You don't think the person you're going to interview, no matter how much you've researched that person, because something's going to throw you off.
Yeah.
It could be the way they look. It could be that the fact is that there is a child there, or somebody else, or a wife, or another publicist, or another writer that they've just been interviewing with. You don't know what's going to happen, so you have to just sort of. I always say it's like a tabula rasa. You just clear the slate. The door opens, and you're just smiling. Hi, nice to meet you. Whoever
Right.
you are. Even if you're a really bad guy, you want to get in there. It's what I call the Encyclopedia Approach. You have to get through the door. You have to establish yourself. You have to have eye contact. The first few minutes of any interview is the most important few minutes that you have, because a person's going to see you. They're going to see what kind of intelligence you show. And that's in the way you, and what kind of feeling they get from you, right? I mean, if you're smiling and it's a real smile, or if you're smiling and it's a nervous smile. If you're starting to sweat, that's okay to sweat, because you're showing them respect. You're nervous. And it's okay.
Right.
When I first met, I remember the early interviews I did with Lucille Ball, Carol Burnett, a lot of the, people who are, were icons, and I'm sitting there as a young, learning how to do this. And I got these few questions that I've gotten, and I'd just feel, the sweat starts dripping down my, and I would put my finger like this, to dry myself. I mean, it was like, but, once you start talking, you lose that nervousness, because they're responding to you. And that's, to me, where it boils down to, as far as we'll talk about doing interviews, to me, that's a very crucial aspect of it. The very beginning, what you look like, how you dress. When I would teach this, I always, whenever the guests would come, if I had Al Pacino coming, or Farrah Fawcett, or Diane Keaton, or Joyce Carol Oates, or Steve Martin, I had a lot of different people come to my class. And I used to say, I want you to dress as if you were going to their house. I don't care if you wear jeans or if you wear a tuxedo. I want you to feel comfortable in your clothes going there, and how you present yourself. And it was always fascinating just to see what they chose. You know what I mean? But, are they going to show cleavage if they're women, or are they going to cover themselves up? Are men going to, look casual, or look, formal? And so, there's just so many different ways and so many aspects that, about that you have to think about when you do these things. Everything is calculated, as far as appearance, as far as, the opening, where you're going to get it to. And then, you have to be free flowing. You have to just sort of let things happen as they
Yeah.
happen, but you have to remain in control, because you may only have half hour, an hour,
Right.
2 hours. My job was always, no matter who I talked to, somewhere early on, I wanted to make sure they knew that I wanted to come back. No matter how long we talked. I may talk 5 hours with you, but I want to come back. Can we set up another date, kind of thing? And they look at you and say, well, I think we can try to get done today. I said, I know, but just in case, when you start showing that you are so well prepared, and it's all about them. Remember, you're interviewing them, so it's all about
of
them.
course, yeah.
So they get to like that. You know what I mean? Once they settle in and they see, oh, this is the story of my life, and I can tell my stories. Well, okay, and then you work yourself into it. So it may take you hours to get, the good material that you want, and you don't know what that good material is yet, but you're looking for that, and what you're looking for is for them to say something that you had never heard before. To me,
and
the secret of a good interview is to give the reader, the audience, something they don't know about that person. Right. That's important. A lot of people don't realize that. They just give you the same thing over and over. They let people, if I have a half hour, with Woody Harrelson, and he starts telling me all the stories that I've read already, and then by the time I get to what I want to get to, it's too late. What have I got? Nothing sensational, nothing that's any editor's going to jump for joy. I like the idea that when my editor reads it, goes, wow, I didn't know that about this person. Then I know I've done a good job.
Was that when you interviewed Elliot Gould and he kept saying information because you were asking the same old, was that when you really started to learn to go?
That was a very big lesson, and it happened very early. I had success with about 5 or 6 people: Lucille Ball, Carol Burnett, Ray Bradbury, Linus Pauling. I had some good stuff, Mae West, and then I did Elliot. And Elliot was a very different character. Elliot talked like a James Joyce stream of consciousness. And if I saw Elliot and I came back 2 weeks later, he would just, his life was continuing, and he would start talking about the 2 weeks that I didn't know anything about, let's say, and I have to catch up in my head. I have to wait. But Elliot intrigued me, and I ended up doing 5 different sessions with him. And the very first session, he was not even there. I was at his house. The publicist takes me into, Paul Block was his publicist then, and we go into his house in Beverly Hills. He's not there. And we wait around about an hour, 2 hours, getting dark now. And Paul had to leave. So he says, you wait here, Elliot will be here. He's leaving me alone in Elliot Gould's house. I don't know Elliot. I haven't been introduced, and I'm in the house. Okay, so I sit there and I wait, and then finally he shows up, and he's a little high. And so he says, we starting to talk, and then he says, let's listen to Marvin Gaye. And I said, no, Elliot, I said, better that we tape record without music behind us. Okay. And then he says, let's do something else. And I said, and then I said, look, you're from Brooklyn. I'm from Brooklyn. What was it like for you growing up in Brooklyn? And he says, information. And then I'd say, you did the Fox You Bet commercials when you were a kid. You would, was that the start of your career? Information. And then that happened 2 or 3 more times. 2 or 3 more times, because information. And I didn't. So I said to him, Elliot, maybe now's not the time, a good time for us to talk. Maybe I should come back and do this again. And he looked at me and says, what do you mean, man? We're talking. We're talking. And I went, oh, okay. He's not kicking me out. But then I started thinking, what is he talking about? Well, he's talking about information that is already out there. I knew he was in Brooklyn. Everybody who ever read anything about him would have known that. So immediately I started to look at him as a guru, right? A highfalutin kind of character who actually had something to teach, but in a different way. He didn't say, ask me something different. He didn't say that. He just said, we're talking. And I knew we weren't talking for publication yet. So that was a great lesson. And yes, I do. I used it as in my You Talking to Me. It's one of the first things I write about is that particular thing taught me a great deal. Elliot and I talked on the phone just the other day. I mean, I have been stayed friendly with Elliot all these years, and he's turned 80 now. You know, so it's a pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, such a fantastic actor. It's interesting, this thing about not asking the same questions, because a lot of the stories you've told, I've read.
Right.
However, my audience here might not know those stories. So, would you ever want someone to repeat a story because it was a great story, or would you just try to get them to elaborate on it if they were a little general about it?
Well, doing what you're doing, which is a visual, you'd want the story repeated, I guess, because obviously you're thinking about your audience. It's not just you. When I would go one-on-one with someone, I would want to go a little further. I'd say, like I had Truman Capote tell me the story about, when he was in Key West, Florida. Fabulous story. One of the funniest stories ever. And it always gets a laugh. I show it, sometimes when I do things, but, anyway, it just depends on the genre. I mean, if you are doing visual, if you can get someone to tell a good story that's funny, that makes people laugh or something, great. Have them tell it. Let them perform. When I interviewed on camera once. I did 50 or so Playboy interviews on camera, and I was trying to duplicate the Playboy interview in the magazine.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah,
but it's a different thing because you have a cameraman, you have a soundman, you have a director somewhere often, and they want you to listen to something in your ear, which I never did. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. But it's a different form, and so you have to deal with that, and you have to make sure. In the editing room, when we'd edit these things, all the best stories I couldn't put into the interview because they were too long. I'm a long form person. So if you tell me a 12-minute story, I love it. But if I try to put that on the camera, we only have 8 minutes for the whole interview, or 10 minutes. So you have to really get it down. You have to make sure people aren't drinking when they're telling one story, and then when you edit it, you may have somebody with the bottle, and then the bottle's full later and empty earlier, or whatever. Right. So there's a lot of things you have to think about when you're doing a visual interview versus one that's in print. So ask me to tell any story you want. That's okay with me.
Well,
I'll tell it.
Yeah, no, I mean, because you have so many great stories that it's they're certainly worth repeating and hearing again. But in that case, when you were doing these on camera, I imagine that was not the purpose to replicate what you had in the long form interviews. You were just were you just trying to get something specific in the camera?
No. My job was to try to replicate. That's why they hired me when they.
So it was to okay.
It was that was the idea. They said, look, if you're doing Playboy on the air, you have to. Playboy is known for its naked ladies, right? For the centerfold. So you would show a photo shoot. That was a given. You'd do that. Right. They were known for short fiction and stuff, and cartoons. You'd have cartoons. You'd have to, if they could retell a story, they'll do that. And then you have the interview. The interview and the centerfold were the two most popular parts of Playboy for 60 years or whatever. So if you're going to do Playboy on the air, you have to try to do interviews that are newsworthy, that can catch you, that show you something you never saw before. So, and of course, you deal with sex every time. If I didn't ask a sex question, the director would be, Larry, you didn't ask him about that. I'm talking to a Nobel Prize winner here. I don't need it. You have to always you have to know your audience, I guess. But no, I try to do very, very broad. I did Miles Davis. I have 4 hours with Miles Davis. It's like amazing. Pavarotti, and then we cut it down to something very small, but all that other stuff, book worthy.
Did you have the editing choices for the camera, or was that not up to you?
Yeah. No, I was in the editing room for the first 30 or so. And then they started that they reduced my salary. And I said, well, then I will reduce my hours, because I'd spend nights in the editing room putting those things together. I said, I'll do the interview, but the things I said, I won't get the interview for you. That's your job. Because I always got, they told me who they wanted. I went after it. I knew how to do that. But that's part of, you're taking all that time to get to the person. Then you're preparing to do the interview. Then you go on camera and you do that. Then you go to the editing room and you look at what you have. Then you write the introduction to it, and get the images, and you put it together. Then you find your ending. All of that I did on my own with them. I worked with other people who, put the editors and stuff, but I was my work, and it took a lot of time to get one done. So I said, okay, if they reduce my fee, then I'll do the interview. That I have to do, right? I go on camera, I'll do that. I'll do the preparation. But if I can eliminate, calling the publicist every few days and, can I get to him, calling the lawyer, whatever, whoever you kept calling to get to it, that will take out a lot of time. And then those hours in the editing and late at night, let them do it. Okay. I wasn't so obsessed with it after that. So I guess money is involved in that kind of stuff. When you do your own stuff, money means nothing. You know what I mean? It's like I'm self-publishing my books now. Why? Because I can put out a lot of books that I want to put out rather than go through the publishers that take a year to put out a book. And, and then they want to see what the reviews are. They want to see how you do before they give you the assignment to do the next book, the contract. This way, I'm on my own. I can do it. But I did my first 12 or 15 books with Simon & Schuster and with Random House and with New American Library and the University of Mississippi and, a whole bunch of other public publishers. And then I started doing my own stuff, and I'm happy, but I'm not rich.
Right. Whole other ball game.
It's a whole other ball game.
Did your parents eventually start to say, "Good job, Larry"?
I think my parents were always proud of me.
Yeah.
I think they were. Look, I was the first person put into the High School Hall of Fame at Jericho, right? When they put in a Hall of Fame thing. And my book, the Houston book had come out already, and the Capote book had come out. So, I think when they went to that, I think that was a very proud moment for them, to see that. And, no, they never gave me, too much of a hassle about it. Once they saw that I was able to earn a living, that's what every parent worries about. Like, is your kid going to be able to make it in what they're doing? Maybe they should have been. And then, look, the Peace Corps worried them. I left the country because I didn't want to be in the Army as well. I didn't want to be drafted. And, my father, who was in World War II, said, he thought, you got to do what everybody else has to do. You're not privileged. You have to go in.
Right.
I said, Dad, if it was a different war, if it was a different situation, if it was World War II, I'd go in. But I'm not going into this. I agree with Muhammad Ali. I had no problem with the Viet Cong.
Yeah.
Me. So that was a big decision in my life. I don't blame the people who went in. I've had a number of friends who did, and they wanted to be writers. They went for the experience. They said, hey, you have to, And I said, well, if Scott Fitzgerald didn't go in, Hemingway did. Fitzgerald didn't. So just depends.
What was your relationship like with your family as you got older? Because you talked those fights with your sister in your book, and all those hassles you got into when you were with the parties in your house, and I mean it's quite a childhood. But you talked about your father was working a lot. He didn't necessarily communicate too well. What was it like as you got older?
Oh, well, I think, look, my father and we went at it a lot. My sister says that we were always fighting. I said, no. I said, I don't think so. But, there were times, and there were some times when I really deserved what I got, as my father, I think, he was not a man who cursed. He was a gentleman. in a lot of ways, and he had a very charming personality. People liked him, he liked to tease a lot. But my father didn't like to be teased. And the reason, I think, because I've come to this conclusion, because I have a daughter and a nephew who are left-handed, like my father was, and I believe that left-handed people don't like to be teased, but they sure can do it. I mean, I'm never met a person. If someone, if you try to, be sarcastic, and then someone gets really their hairs go up on the back of their head, I say, "You lefty." but anyway, no, but
I'm going to test that theory out. I'm going to look out for that.
Yeah. But I mean, not to say, I mean, some of the smartest people, Leonardo da Vinci, etc., were lefty. I wrote an article about being left-handed once, but and I'm not, but it's fascinated me. So my relationship with both my parents, I think, was good after college. I think they came around to. I don't ever remember fighting with them or anything after that. My sister and I, on the other hand, we've gone at it for years. It's it's amazing. We're in a very good place right now, thank God, and I want to be there. But yeah, I've experienced that. I have cousins who've never fought. They could never understand. They keep saying, "How did you and Roberta get you're always fighting?" They always remember that. So, but it's interesting because she's an artist as well. She's a great photographer. She's got children's books that sell far more than any of my books.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Dollywood puts out one of her books. Buys them by the tens of thousands and all that stuff,
Oh wow.
So she, so we both have creativity in our lives. We're basically two creative people. And where it comes from, we don't know. Not from my parents, not from any relatives. It's just somehow it hit our genes. Thank goodness. We were able to both do it.
Yeah. No, that's what's your sister's name?
It's Roberta Grobel, like mine, but Intrada is her last name, and she uses that as well. So she says Grobel Intrada, Intrater. Yeah, she does.
I'll look those books up.
But I mean, really, those cardboard, board books of Smile and all that, little children's books. She sells a lot of those. They're great, and Scholastic puts them out. And then she did a thing called Two Eyes, a Nose, and a Mouth. It's a wonderful book, but it's pretty interesting stuff.
What I wanted to ask you, because I remember you once said that Christian Brando, Marlon Brando's son, didn't he want to write a book with you about his relationship with his father? Because he said his father was not the best to him. Is that
he hated his father,
and the irony is that Brando hated his father. So why did he hate him so much? I mean, I heard there's some very bad stories, but did he tell you more?
By the time Christian was calling me, he had already killed Dag Jolene.
That's right. Yeah.
In Marlon's house, using Marlon's gun that was in that. So why did his father have a problem with Christian? Well, because he killed Cheyenne's boyfriend. Cheyenne was pregnant or something. Cheyenne kills herself. Yeah, and he goes to jail. Not an easy family situation. And,
right.
But Christian called me from, I think it was Boston or Oregon or something. He was staying with a lot of drug people and stuff. And he said that it was another of Marlon's children. Oh gosh, she's a lawyer. And she said, "Why don't you call me?" She gave him my number and said, "Maybe Larry will work with you." So he called, and we started to talk, and we talked over a period of months. And I really liked Marlon, so I didn't want to write a book that would hurt Marlon. That would be in such a whole negative book. On the other hand, I'm the only person he's reached out to. There's some story here. I don't know what it is yet, but so the thing is that if you remember, what's his name? Robert Blake was in jail or indictment for killing his wife,
right?
Girlfriend, wife, and he said he didn't do it. That someone else came along and did it. And Christian had dated this woman, And so he was a suspect. So he could not come back into LA, into California, for fear of being apprehended. And since he had already served time for the other thing, he got out of jail after a few years. Maybe it was 6 years, I don't know. He would call me and say, maybe what he was going to do was come in and sneak in. And I was going to at first invite him to stay with me. And I asked my wife, though, I said, can we hide him and I'll talk to him. She says, I don't want him in the house. He killed somebody. I said, well, yeah, but that's okay. I didn't want to upset her. My sister-in-law had a house that had a back room, outside, little guest room. So I said, maybe we could put him there, hide him there. And my wife said, you're not going to ask her. I don't want her. She's alone. I don't want her. Okay. So I couldn't get him to to sneak him in that easily. And then, it just never happened. I never met with him. I didn't want to fly up to Oregon or whatever it was. Because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it. I certainly was willing to listen to him and, spend time with him. I listened to him on the phone about things, but a book is different. A book is it's like when I did the book on the Houston family, John Huston said, well, John wrote his own book. He said, I'm not that interested in a book about me, but my family, my father, Walter Huston, never really got the treatment he deserved. And so maybe if you want to do it, he says, but why don't you meet with my son first, Tony, he's in town, and meet with Angelica, my 2 children here, and see what you think of them. And if you still want to do this book, I'll do it. Now, I know what John was saying was, let Tony and Angelica judge you. And if they say, okay, I'll do it. I know that's where it was, but he was saying it as if I was going to make the decision, right? So I meet with Tony. And Tony comes down and he starts telling me when he was 16 years old, he hated his father. He said, I'd come down for a dinner with there'd be Marlon Brando there, or there would be, Jean-Paul Sartre. And, and my dad would say, go change your jacket. He says, I was wearing a sports jacket, but it wasn't a tuxedo. And he wanted to, and then I hated, and he starts telling me these stories. I didn't have a tape recorder on. I was just meeting him for the first time. I said, okay, I want to do this book.
Yeah, well,
he's willing to talk to me honestly, and that's what you want,
Yeah.
And so then I met Angelica right after she won the Oscar for Prizzi's Honor, and I met her at Delmonico's restaurant. It was a fish restaurant, and we sat there and talked for a while. And she said, "Listen, every family is like an onion, where you peel back layers." And she says, my family has more layers than most. And I'm not sure I want those layers peeled back. And I said to her, Angelica, that's my job. If I was to do this book, I would want to peel back as many layers as I could find. So if you don't want me to do that, just tell me and I won't. And she said, well, my father trusts you, so I'll trust you. That was it. It was really down to just, she could have just said, okay, I'd rather you did. And that was it. I would not have done that book. And that was the next 3 years of my life, working on that book and being with John. And he gave me his address books. And I went to Europe. I went to meet with Roman Polanski in France, and Olivia de Havilland and Suzanne Flan. And then I got in England, I met with everybody that John dealt with, Edna O'Brien, and I mean, just amazing stories, and Ava Gardner, people who'd never talked to reporters before, talked to me because John said to do it. And he told everybody to talk and be honest. And it was a relief for so many people. They had so many stories, but they didn't want to ever talk about it. But John said, just tell them the truth. Just be truthful. Boom! I got all the great stories. So that book kept me really occupied. I'm very proud of that book.
Yeah, I still have to read that one. I mean, I like the John a lot. Do you have a favorite Huston film?
I have a few that I watch whenever it comes on. If Treasure of Sierra Madre comes on, I never miss that movie. I love that movie. So I would, I like the same with The Man Who Would Be King. I always like the performance of Sean Connery and what's his name?
Michael Caine.
Michael Caine. Thank you very much. You know, for different reasons, the Flannery O'Connor one that he did later on. Oh boy.
Oh, there he is.
That's Flannery O'Connor.
Perfect timing, right there.
That's an old telephone. My telephone battery is gone, so I have found an old phone that you dial. I was showing it to my grandson. He's 6 years old on the phone. I said, "You know what this is?" Well, I said, "This is a real phone." I said, "Look, watch. I number here and number here." It's really funny. I love it though. I love that. It got such a
I remember those.
Yeah,
I remember. I'm old enough to remember those. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that there are about 12 of John's 40 or so films that I think are classic films, you know, that'll be around for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is there anything you could share that Christian said about his father that was really jaw dropping?
No, because it wasn't that kind of thing. It was just that he was mean. He felt he didn't give him money. He was, you know, he said, you know, he was down and out and he needed to borrow money, and he ended up borrowing it from Jack Nicholson. Jack was like the second father from him because they lived in the same compound.
Yeah, next door, I think. Yeah.
So there was 3 houses there, and Jack ended up buying Marlon's house, I believe, and just using it as a garden. But yeah, no, it was that kind of thing. There were certain things I do know about the Hustons that I did not write about out of consideration for hurting the family in any way, because they were very open to me, and but there are certain things, you know, I found out. I said, well, do the kids need to hear that? You know, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Fair enough. Just on the topic of, you know, familial relationships, I also loved your book on Robert Evans, and there's something he said that I always could never forget, which was about, he said he was a bad father, that, you know, that he told his son, I'm not going to throw the baseball around with you. I don't do any of that stuff, but you can follow me around.
Right.
Wherever I go, you could follow me around. Do you think he just didn't care about being a good father in that way? Do you think he just didn't value the role?
No, you know, it's different. Anthony Hopkins, I think, always he told a story that his daughter and he didn't get along. They had a lot of problems, and it got to a point where he said, "Well, if I don't see her again, that's it. That's life. Goodbye," like that. And I questioned, like you're asking me about that, you know, that, but I was asking him about that, and I didn't believe it. I said, you know, it's your daughter, you know, but I do believe it. I believe.
I was quite shocked to hear that as well. I thought, well, why the hell would he say that?
Well, you know, when you're a father, I mean, I have 2 daughters, and I find that there are times when they can't stand me. They just can't. You know, what can I do? You know, I don't feel I'm wrong, and that's the problem, because they see whatever it is that they're seeing is honest for them. That's, you know, they're dealing with stuff that I don't realize they're dealing with, and then you know, and I may be the cause of it, or they may be dealing with something that has nothing to do with me. But it's easier to get mad at me to let it out than to get mad at whatever they're mad at. And I've come to that understanding, that realization that maybe I just have to accept whatever it is that life brings us, you know, but try to keep everybody together as best I can, you know. So
right.
You know, I didn't know that before, but, you know, but I think family is difficult. I mean, I had an aunt and uncle, an aunt whose brother, they had a fight when they stopped talking to each other for the rest of their lives. Because of the land. They both owned some land, and one sold it later than the other, didn't give half the money.
That stuff happens so often.
All the time. And that's why when you read novels, you know, that's when so many books are about family or about situations like that. So no, I'm not, you know, shocked by that kind of stuff. I think that it happens. And sometimes, you know, look, there are a lot of bad fathers because they have egos that are about themselves. You
Right.
know, I mean, I have a number of friends I know who are A-type people. They cannot do an interview, for instance, be the interviewer. They want to be interviewed. They want to be talked to. But when it comes to, them asking about you, they don't listen that much.
Right.
People like that.
Right. What so in Evan's case, why do you think is it a generational thing? Like that he would say, well, I'm a bad father, but we're friends now, or
Oh,
is it ego?
no. Well, I don't know if it's ego, but I mean, but Robert Evans, when you look at his life, he had quite an interesting life. I mean, Ali
He
McGraw
did, yeah.
he had movie stars that he was with. He was a producer. He made some major films. He was the head of a studio at Paramount. So he had a big life, and he did cocaine. We know that. He had got caught about it, and he had to go on a rehab kind of thing. When I talked to him, he would go into the bathroom, come back out, and his nose was all covered. Like I don't know if he ate a donut or whatever.
Right.
That happened with De Niro too. I mean, people go out and they come back, and they act like I don't know. I mean, you accept certain aspects of it. You don't ask about it because they'll kick you out.
Right.
And but a lot of times people don't care about, they brought children into the world, but they're not the greatest fathers. That's all. They got their own big lives to live, and you're a part of it, but not the main part.
Yeah. Right.
I'm different. That like I feel like towards my grandchildren that I will do anything for them, and I will do anything for my kids for them that they want. I mean, if they, my grandson, he's 6 years old, he says, I miss you. I need you to come up here. Well, it's a 6-hour ride. But I said to my wife, he wants to see us. You know what I mean? It's like you come to a point in your life where, should I work on this book I'm working on, or should we go up and just play with him? Let's go play. I mean, it's a different thing than I don't have time for you, because I'm too busy. My friend who's a doctor told me once, the thing he regretted about his, life as a doctor was that he didn't have enough time with his children. And I never had that regret because I was home all the time. I worked at home, but I could always take a break. My kids would come back and I would be able to go down and play with them for 20 minutes. Then I'd go back up to work and then I go back, but I was always around.
Right.
I don't think they ever knew exactly what I did. Daddy's just there, but the door is closed. Leave, alone. But a lot of people have regrets about when they get older about the fact that they didn't give their kids the proper amount of time. That's probably more common than uncommon.
How did you mentioned you'd go down from your office and play for 20 minutes, but you also were traveling a lot for your work. So when you had a family, how did you find a way to balance the two? Your wife's also an artist.
Yeah, but when I traveled, if I had assignments to do, I didn't go away for long periods of time. I may go away 3 days, 4 days. If I go to New York to interview somebody, and then I'd go back. The only time I took an extended time was 6 weeks when I went to Europe for the Houston book. I planned about 20 or 30 interviews. I had at least 1 or 2 interviews every day, and they were with famous people, and I had to get to them and maneuver around. And I rented an apartment when I was in England, and and I would call my kid. My wife had 2 small kids at the time. They were 9 and they were 7 and 3. So it was not easy for her. But what can I do? I mean, I'm writing a book. I couldn't. Ava Gardner asked me to write her book, and we met 6 times. But then she wanted me to move with her to move to England, where she was living, and I knew that would take a year. And I'd have to be there. So I thought I'd have to uproot the family. We'd have to sublet our house. We'd have to find out schooling for the kids, that sounded exciting in a certain way. But I was also writing the Houstons at the time. And I just said, I'm under contract. I can't do that. So I didn't do that book. It's a shame. It was a very high paying job, but I didn't do
it. But you did the Gardner one. How did you do the book with her?
Yeah, some years later, I just
okay. Oh, so that was later.
I found
Okay.
the box up on my shelf. I said, Ava Gardner. And I said, gee, how much? Because I spent 6 weeks weekends with her. And I had about 300 or 400 pages of material. So I put out, I knew it wasn't a real biography, the way you'd go into extensive things of it. But I covered quite a bit of material, part of her life. So I wrote I call it Conversations with Ava Gardner, but it's done more in a prose than in a Q&A form. So I'm talking about our life and how we did it. So it's that kind of book. And that book,
okay.
I put that book out in 2012, and that book sells every month. I would say it sells 5, 6 books, 7 books. Every time I look at at Amazon, I say, oh, another one. One time, 70 books, Ava Gardner. I said, 70 in one day. Who bought that? It must be a book club, right? That's the only thing it could possibly be. And I'm always surprised that Ava Gardner book, the Capote book, the Brando book, those are the books are being read around the world, in India, in Japan, in Australia, because I can see it. I see, oh, somebody bought it, and I can see where. And I said, that's so interesting. I'm not selling thousands, but I'm selling,
right.
over a course of a year, hundreds of books of these particular people are still alive in the imagination of people. And that's nice to know.
Do any idea why those people still stand out?
Well, why does Marilyn Monroe still stand out? We still, look at all these years later. That you still see books on Marilyn coming out all the time. Well, Marilyn, James Dean, the people who died young, Elvis,
right.
they seem to will live for a long time. Ava, look, Ava was, many people considered her the most beautiful woman in the world. For a while, you looked at Ava, those early pictures of Ava Gardner are stunning,
Yeah.
But she had a very wild kind of life. She was out there with the bullfighters, Domingan and all. She was out there with Hemingway. She was there with the fight she had with Sinatra and Artie Shaw and Mickey Rooney.
Rooney, yeah.
Her life, it's a fascinating, very free, very feminist life. She didn't take. When Howard Hughes came after her and punched her in the face, she picked up a brass bell and knocked a tooth out of his mouth.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had the first tooth implant before there was such a thing as an implant. Howard Hughes had it. He said,
oh, wow.
That's how 1953 or something. And no, she picked up a chair after that. He went down on the ground and she was going to kill him. She had lost her mind and she was about to crush him with the chair. And Bappy, her assistant, came in and she saw this and she just started clapping her hand and screaming her name. Ava, she snapped her out of it, right? And Ava just realized what she was about to do. A pretty amazing story.
Did she tell you that? And then is that in the book? I haven't read this one yet. I'm going to. Yeah. But so she told you that. Wow.
Oh, yeah. That's that. Yeah. There's some amazing stories. That's George C. Scott, who attacked, he was crazy in love with her. And he was doing the movie The Bible, and she was in it. And anyway, they had he was so jealous that he would chase her down and he would attack her. And John Huston had to have guards put out in front of David's door. So because Scott would drink and then go to see her and wouldn't happen. So one time at the Beverly Hills Hotel, he came in on her and they had this fight and he smashed a bottle. So, and he had her down like this and he had the bottle at her face. Most beautiful woman in the world.
Shit.
He was about to cut up her face, and she got, it was amazing. And I heard these stories, pretty. So why Ava? Yeah, it's because it's a good read. What's interesting?
Yeah, well, that is a damn good read.
if you the book's on Kindle and it's it's $13 to $14 as a paperback, and it got some great pictures. I got Ava Gardner.
Yeah, I'm gonna read that one.
But the thing about what's interesting is if you go to the Ava Gardner Museum in Durham, North Carolina, they ordered 75 copies of the book from me through Amazon, but there was a condition. The family did not like the presentation of the way Ava talked. all the FUCKs, all of the curse words. They said they were offended by it. I said, well, that's how Ava talked. I mean, this is a direct quote. So for the museum, I made a different version. I took out all the dirty words and I, toned it down. And that book exists. So it's a red cover. You cannot get it on Amazon because I wouldn't let it on Amazon. The one that's there is the one with the yellow cover title. The red title, same thing, Conversations with Ava Gardner. That's if you go to the museum, you can get that expurgated version if her language offends you.
Oh, I'm okay with the language. I'm okay.
Yeah, so
I'll have to read. Speaking of Scott, George C. Scott, because you mentioned that you had the opportunity to interview Clint Eastwood and you turned it down because of his politics.
Yeah.
So, but didn't George C. Scott also have those same politics? Yeah, so why him and not Eastwood?
Well, because I had already done Eastwood. Scott. That interview with Scott, by the way, was a really interesting interview. It came out the same time that Ronald Reagan got elected, and so the news, there was no news. The interview just sort of slipped through the atmosphere. Sometimes the interviews I've done have gotten a lot of attention, like with Governor Ventura or Bobby Knight or Brando, whatever, Barbara Streisand, a lot of attention. And the Scott one should have, but it didn't. And it was at that time. Clint, there are certain things I've turned down because of work, because I thought about, I had read that something with Clint Eastwood. He seemed very conservative at the time. Nowhere near as much as he later became with it. This is years ago. And this was before he became a director. Before he started directing. So had I had a chance later to do him, I definitely would have, because I would have liked to speak to directors, because I've written screenplays. So if you can if you can talk to a director, they may read your screenplay. But otherwise, you had no chance. But it was just a choice thing. Was it Stephen King? I turned down Stephen King. And that was probably a mistake too. But I started reading The Stand. A lot of people told me The Stand was his best book. So I read 400 pages of The Stand, and I put it down one day and I didn't pick it up. So it didn't, what I mean? So I said, well, if I'm going to interview Stephen King, I have to read 10 more books.
All the books, yeah.
A lot of books.
Yeah.
But I think Stephen King's a great writer. And I read his book on writing, and I think it's a terrific book. And if I was asked to do Stephen King now, I would do it. But I didn't then. I had the luxury of being able to turn down certain people and still make a living, doing my stuff. That was great. These days, if you get an assignment, you better do it. because you can't get assignments so easily. I mean, nobody's putting my rotary phone to work saying, hey, we have this person we want you to interview. It's not happening. And I feel, it's a shame. I have a talent that's gone to waste because nobody's asking.
Why do you think the long-term journalism doesn't happen anymore?
Well, it's the internet. I mean, what happened is
that's what I figured.
The millennials have a different attitude towards reading and to what they want to see. People are so used to, Twitter and Instagram, and they learn how to write short. It's like writing in shorthand. Basically, they write 150 words, 200 or 300 words. I was doing 30,000 word interviews that were being published. 20,000 word interviews, and you don't see that kind of space in any magazine that's left. You just don't see it. And if you're going to put it up on the screen, as in the e-magazines or whatever it is that's on the internet, you're not going to get. You don't want to scroll through 50 pages, 80 pages. It's not going to happen. It's interesting because James A. Michener told me. I asked him. And Michener wrote these big books, Hawaii and Texas and Poland. They were all 1,000-page books. And I said, how did you know that people wanted to read these size books? And the first one was Hawaii. And he said, I knew when I saw what happened, that television was coming along and people were watching TV for a half hour or an hour, 1952, 53, 54. He says, I knew they would crave the long form. That was how he thought. And he was right. They did buy it by the millions. but no longer. That's, see what I mean? That now, are people craving the long form interview? Well, they're getting it with you and I right now, in the sense of,
I
okay,
am. I am.
you know,
Yeah.
people really going to, how many people who started watching have turned off because they have something else to do? You know, it's
Right.
very rare. It's very rare. Are they getting wisdom out of this thing, or just hearing some guy talk about his life? You know, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know why we're not reading as deep as we are. I just did an article for AARP magazine, AARP. It's the largest magazine in America, biggest circulation, because it goes to people over 50. So forget the young people; they don't even know this exists. Older people are going to see it, right? And it's a 2-page article about my grandson. I mean, I wrote
Yeah.
about and what he does and his art and stuff. It was fun to write. There are pictures and all that stuff. But you know, it's rare when I get to do an article. You know, and then, you know, if I want to do it about some other things, nobody's jumping at it. That's why I publish my
Right.
own stuff.
Right. So I
Right?
imagine if someone did want to do the long form interviews, what is it? I guess nowadays it's what I'm doing, podcasts. Do you see anything resembling it?
Well, I guess if we kept talking for 2 more hours, I would say, yeah, it's resembling, because somewhere along the line you'll get me to. I mean, you made an attempt with my father, you know, but I'm not going to cry over my father. I'm not going to, you know. I mean, I don't. I'd have to really. You'd have to keep asking me about it. Keep asking me,
Right.
and maybe I would finally get to sort of analyze it and think about it. But it's easier to skip over it than to go psychoanalytically into it on most of these forms. But if you're there, like I was there, talking to people one on one, and it could get to 2, 3 in the morning, and we're still talking. Or I'd come, you know, early, you know, at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd see Pavarotti, you know, I'd go at MGM when he's making Yes Giorgio, and then he would come to my house, and then, or Patty Hearst, and I would go up to San Mateo, where she was get a hotel room, and she would come, and then she'd look out the window and see the police cars on the roof there. They're watching us. They're watching us, she would say. And she's probably right. But you know, I mean, it's like those kinds of things that lead you to conversation. You know, why?
Right.
But you need the experience of it.
Right. And you need all that, them to give you that time. I mean, what celebrity is going to give someone that time nowadays, unless maybe they accept someone to do a book? I don't know.
No, I think it is. It's a book form. Like I would like to do I would like to do Bob Dylan. So, you know, I've been thinking about, I should just write to his publicist or write to the, you know, Columbia Records. But he's not going to do it. I don't think he's going to give me that kind of time, you know, but I should do it. I should make the effort. If I don't make the effort, it'll never happen. But if I make the effort, you never know. Sometimes it'll happen. You got to go for it. When I teach, you know, I tell students, one of my favorite assignments was I would always say, what do you want to do when you get out of here? I want to be a director. I want to be a lawyer. I want to go to this UCLA school. Okay, whatever they would say to me, I would think about what would help you. Who's the directors you most admire? Spielberg and George Lucas. I said, okay, here's your assignment. I want you to write to Spielberg and to Lucas. Tell them you're a UCLA student, that your grade depends on your outside interview, and that you're the person that, you know, you'd like to do. The odds are you will not get this interview. So have a backup, have 3 more other, but you have a better chance at getting it as a student than you do if I ask them as a you know, professional interview. So it worked. I mean, I had one student, he says to me, what's it like, you know, do you have any recommendations for New York restaurants? And we're in LA. I said, yeah. I said, I'm going to New York for the weekend. I said, what are you going to do? He says, I'm going to interview Tim Robbins. I said, Tim Robbins? How'd you get that? He says, what's your assignment? I said, seriously? I said, I've been trying to get to Tim Robbins for Playboy, and he never responded. My student went and did it. He did it, and then helped him get it published somewhere too. So, you know, you never know. You never know. You just got to keep trying. And the same thing. This one girl wanted to go to law school, UCLA. I said, what do you think your chances are? She says, not very good. My grades aren't that good. I said, okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go interview the dean of UCLA Law, whoever that is, and do a really good job. Work on the questions. Show me your questions before you go, and impress that person. Because when you're I said, if you are a borderline, right? If you get on the wait list to the school, and he sees, oh, it's Roberta Jones. She's the one who interviewed me, sent me the article. I really thought that was good. Let's put her in, right? You don't know, but you want to take whatever shot you can. So, you can use the excuse of being a student to get into doors that you can't necessarily get into normally.
Why would they be more willing to talk to a student than because maybe they're worried a writer is going to, mess with it in a tabloid or something?
Yeah, it's a different thing. It's a different thing when it's a student. Okay. Anytime a student writes to me, I always respond to them. If I'm asked to speak to students, the Society of Journalism, there's a thing of all the editors of newspaper journalists and asked me to do this, and I did. I spoke, went to an auditorium and do it. Would I do it to another thing? I don't know, but I didn't even think twice. There's something about working with students that I think people accept easier.
Yeah, maybe because they know they're doing it to learn and they're actually interested, as opposed to this person's trying to. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
I don't know if that's the case. I mean, if I'm writing to somebody who's trying to do it, they know I'm interested because I'm going to keep asking.
Yeah. In your case, it's different. I noticed that for your Brando script, you said you wanted Woody Harrelson for Brando. Why him?
Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges told me that, and I thought Jeff Bridges would make a good Brando, and I gave him the screenplay called Conversation with Brando. It was Brando at 57 years old, and I thought Jeff could have done it beautifully. Yeah. I think, and I know Jeff a little bit because I put him in my Houston book, and I wrote about him for something else. Anyway, for some reason, I gave it to a producer. The producer gave it. I said, "Can you get to Jeff Bridges and give it to them?" Yeah, and he did. Jeff read it, and he wrote to me, and he called me, and I was surprised. And he said, Larry says, I don't know if I could play Marlon Brando. I don't, and Al Pacino told me this. He said, no American actor will do it. No American, you got to get a foreign actor. But I said, well, he's 50. Brando at 57 was already after. He was about 200-300 pounds. He wasn't the gorgeous icon he was when he was younger. So Jeff said, who should do this? And I said, he says Woody Harrelson. And I said, my God, I had thought of so many actors, but I never thought about Woody Harrelson. Just as I've never thought about James Spader until I've been watching The Blacklist. I said, James Spader could do it. So, and Russell.
Hey, Crowe. I could see that. Yeah.
And Russell.
I could see Spader. Yeah.
So, and I interviewed Spader, but I don't know how to get to him right now. It was like, I'd like to try. So James, if you're watching this from Canada,
give Larry a call.
And not only that, here's the crazy thing. I also think Meryl Streep would be a great Brando. And I actually wrote an article for the Polish magazine, and the title of the article is "Can Meryl Streep play Marlon Brando?"
It's like Kate Blanchett as Dylan, right?
Yeah, because you'd have to get the nose right. You'd have to put on the fat suit. But Meryl has always said she's looking now just for challenges. She's our greatest actor, and Brando was our greatest actor when he was alive. So wouldn't the greatest want to play the greatest? It would be something else.
Yeah.
So there you go. So you have Meryl Streep, Woody Harrelson, James Spader, and Russell
Jeff Bridges.
Well, Jeff's sick now. He has cancer.
Oh, right. That's right. I read that.
And I just wrote him yesterday. I just said, I asked him how he was doing, and he says he's doing fine, which is good to know. I'm glad to be able to say he's doing fine. But it's very sweet of him that he writes back. You never know people like this.
There's also that actor from Titanic who looks exactly like Brett.
Leonardo DiCaprio?
No, he was like the bad guy in Titanic, and he's doing another book on Brando. I don't know if I'll send it to you, but he looks exactly like him. Anyone in the comment box knows, I forget his name, but the spitting image. You might, I don't know if that rings a bell for you, Larry.
Yeah. No, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. but and I believe he's trying to play him in some other book on Brando. When they were getting
based on
the island, yeah.
Yeah, which is I don't know if that, you know, if that's going to be pulled off or not, because I've had some people tell me there's no way he's going to get that done, but he might, you know, and that'll probably kill my project. What the hell? I'm used to that.
Well, that might be a good sequel, you know, because it's on the island is somewhat of a sequel, anyways. Who would play? Who do you think you'd want to play you?
Well,
are you in? Well, I haven't read the script, but are you? I imagine it's you and him.
Yeah, no, it's about my character and his character, fictionalized, but it's basically it's about a young journalist who gets the assignment of his lifetime and feels there's no way he can pull it off. You know, I mean, he's it's like an interview with God, basically, and you know, and then his wife is pregnant, and he's going to have to go to Tahiti and leave her and maybe miss the birth of his child. But if he doesn't do it at that time, then the magazine's going to give it to another person because he's mercurial, Brando. He's not going to just say yes. And he decides he's got to go. And it's a huge family conflict all around. And he goes, and Brando starts fucking around with him, you know, and he plays these games with him, whatever. And this is the story of what happens. So I used to think like Jesse Eisenberg, you know, he has a nervousness kind of thing that
I can see that.
Somebody said, "What about Seth Rogen?" I said, "Seth Rogen? Why not?" You know, I mean, it could be someone you know who brings a lighter thing to it. It could be any. It could be Gyllenhaal. It could be anybody, aged 30 to 35. I'd say 25 to 35 could be any. You know, any young actor who's you know ready to make his chops on something like that, going up against Brando. And the Brando character, you know, assume it'll be big. So, you know, I think it's wide open in that regard as far as picking names. I mean, there's probably 24, you know, that could do it. It's just a matter of getting it out there, and it's hard. You know, I've had it optioned twice, and both times, you know, one the COVID hit, and so you know they wanted to do the thing, and I didn't want to just give them a full year for nothing, but. Yeah, getting a movie done. I mean, I have lots of movies. I've done scripts. I've written screenplays based on my 2 novels, Catch a Falling Star, about an actor who was once the biggest star in the world, and then all of a sudden came crashing down, and now is trying to rebuild his life. And one of his children gets molested by his best friend, and what happens? You know, I mean, all these things happen. It's kind of a dark book in a way, but it does have a resolution. And then the other one is called Begin Again, Finnegan. And that one is about an actor who either accidentally or on purpose killed his mate and calls up this interviewer that was his friend of his at 2:00 in the morning and says, I need to see you. He says, well, I'll come right over. He says, no, I'll come to you. Now you know something's wrong, because why would the actor leave his house? But he comes to him and he says, I think I killed so-and-so. He says, what about the children, the babies? I left them. They're there. Nobody's there. No nanny. He said, well, we got to go back to the house. There's a dead woman there. And he's saying, I need to say I was with you doing an interview. Be my alibi. Now, does the journalist say yes to that? And if he does, there's a no. If he says no, there's no no. And that's the opening of the movie. That's the opening of the book and the opening of the movie as well. You know, it's like that. So yeah, so I've got those 2 scripts done. I put them out as books. I actually put my, screenplays volume 1 and volume 2. I
read that last night. Yeah. So I got to read. So you can get that script, the Brando script.
You can get my scripts, but you can't get them. You have to buy the book. You can't get it on Kindle. I didn't want people to really read them. I didn't want to give away my stories, but I put them out there so I could have a physical book. So if I meet a producer at a party, I could say, hey, here's 2 scripts of mine. You know, that's how I did it. But I know it's crazy. But I have friends who are screenwriters. They've written 40, 50 screenplays. None of them ever got done. They're sitting on shelves, right? When he dies, they're gonna just go in a fireplace somewhere, right? Nothing's gonna happen to it. I have a chance to publish a lot of my work, so why not publish my screenplays? Yeah. I want to be judged by my work, and there it is.
No. I mean, you know, anyone if anyone hasn't read, I mean, this is such a good book. I mean, so I got to read the screenplay. But the Brando book is just fascinating. Were you hoping to stay friends with him? I know you
Yeah.
talked to him a few times. At the end of the book, you're on the phone with him.
Well, I talked with Marlon a number of times after our interview, and I sort of would have liked. He wanted me to do a story once on the Indians, on the sterilization of the American Indian, and he led me down certain paths, and Playboy agreed, and they were gonna sponsor, pay for the expenses and all. But the women didn't want to talk. The women who had been sterilized and stuff. I was trying to get, it was a hard article to write. I would have liked to have done it because Marlon would have been really behind that and all. So that didn't happen. But look, I miss Pavarotti. I really thought Pavarotti and I we hit it off. He came to my house. He ate dumplings in the house with my wife. He played with the kid. I mean, I said to my wife, I said, I can see going to Modena in Italy to visit Pavarotti as we get older over the years, when he's no longer singing, but he was just going to be one of those people you'd keep in touch with. And then he died. Capote died.
Yeah.
Brando died. People that I've, had some kind of contact with. Henry Fonda, I was very close with.
Yeah.
So, look, this is what happens. I guess I could say I talk to dead people.
Yeah. Did any of their deaths hit you hard?
John Huston was I was very close. I was seeing him. I didn't write a word of that while he was alive. All I did was talk to him. I went to see John and we talked for hours. And then I'd see him the next day or 3 days later. When he was sick in the hospital, he'd call me up. He hated the hospital. He hated being bored. So he said he would just, come and talk. Okay, so I come talk. We start talking about things. And then he'd go into a coughing fit. The doctor would come in, smack the phlegm out of him. I'd sit there quietly, and John would just wait, put his hand up, just can't talk yet.
Oh.
And then he'd start, okay, let's talk, and we'd go back into his life. I mean, it was like amazing. So yeah, when he died, in a way, it freed me as well. I started writing the book right after he died. And it took me 18 months to write it. But I spent 18 months just talking to people, in the research of it.
Right.
Capote's death was shocking because we were in the middle. I mean, I was just going every 6 months to Sagaponack and on Long Island, rent the car, go out there, talk to Capote for 5 hours, come back, get that and I was just going to do this for the rest of his life. I thought this is going to be great. One of the great interviews of all time. It's like if you could have had Proust or James Joyce or somebody like that. People were telling me that Capote's book, Answered Prayers, was going to be the most remembered book of the last half of the 20th century. He never finished the book. But I thought I'm having the opportunity to interview him and talk to him for that whole period of time he's doing that book. So I thought if he pulls that book off and I pull off this interview with him, it's going to be one of those things that I'll be remembered for. But but he died, and I put together what I had, and that became Conversation with Capote, which is a big best-selling book. It's still to this day. It sells in 14 languages. But
but I got to read that one too. That's another one I got to get to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful bit of gossip. A lot of that stuff, a lot of things. I mean, he's outrageous. He says things, but it would have been so magnificent had I been able to stay years with him like that. Did you like the movie with Philip Seymour Hoffman playing him? Yeah, both of them. There were 2 movies that were done, and at the same time. I forget the other one, but yeah. I always thought Philip Seymour Hoffman would have been a good Brando when he was, he would have.
Oh yeah, for sure, because he's got the weight. And he's a great actor.
He was a great actor.
Yeah, he was something else. What did you what did you like more, the research or the interview or the editing, or did you love all three?
Who likes research? I mean, that's like that's homework. That's
true.
That's the hardest part is is the research, getting it down, getting everything you need to know, and getting it in an order that when I would do my questions, if I had 500-600 questions, I would try to put them into some kind of order in my mind, that if in the ideal world, I would ask this question, then the next one, right down the line. So if we're talking about your parents, I'm talking about your mother, your father, then we're getting to this, and we get to the end. never happens that way. What you do is you prepare all these things. You start talking about one thing, and all of a sudden something else comes up that happened
Yeah. And
40
you go
years
with it.
ago, and you go to page 16 in your questions. And as you're talking, you're shuffling through, and then you got to check them off with a pen because you got to make sure that you don't repeat yourself. So, but the research, there are three equal parts.
Right.
The interview itself should be the most fun in a way, unless it's a Bobby Knight interview. But even that, is a challenge. It's an experience. But the hardest ones were like when Freddie Prinze Jr. I interviewed him in his house, and we went up to his bedroom, and we were talking in the bedroom. I don't know why we went in the bedroom, but we did. And I look up and I see all these shelves, and they're empty. And I said, Freddie, where's your books? He said, I don't read books. I said, what? I said, yeah. I said, I collect first editions. He says, what's that? So, okay. Now I had to, but I'm still interviewing him, right? I mean, I forget that the books, that's an answer. That's an answer that's there. But
yeah.
I said, well, what do you collect? He says, comic books. Okay, what's the most valuable comic book you have? Okay, Captain Marvel or whatever it was. Okay, and then we started talking about that. And then we talked, the conversation led to other things, which is what, a good interview will do, is that you're listening and you go with it.
Right.
But it was like, and the same thing with Chris O'Donnell.
Chris O'Donnell?
Chris O'Donnell, who, when I interviewed him, I think he was 25. He'd done Scent of a Woman. And we were talking, and I don't know if he was married yet. I don't think he was. Now I think he has 5 children or something, and whatever. But I remember asking him certain questions, and he would say, that's a question my father could answer. I don't know if I could answer that. So he was too young, to answer certain kinds of things, and he knew it. So there's nothing you can do with that. You know what I mean? When you're talking to somebody, I remember with James Franco, I interviewed him, and every time I'd ask him a question he didn't want to answer, he would go, nah. And then I'd ask him a question, he'd go, nah. I go, nah. Right. Finally I said, James, someday somebody's going to do a big interview with you, but it's not going to be me.
Right. Right.
And look at what happened to him.
Now he's like a teacher and writer and all this stuff.
Yeah,
so much stuff he does.
He does an awful lot of stuff, and and also got involved with the Me Too thing. But he's now far more interesting to talk to.
Oh yeah,
a lot of stuff to talk about if you can get him to talk.
Exactly? Did anyone really? You talk about the Bob Knight incident. You talk about some of these people who you found dull. Did anyone turn you off so much that you thought, I don't even want to do these interviews anymore?
No, but not to that point. But Bob Mitchum turned me off. Robert Mitchum was, and even George C. Scott in the beginning, and Jerry Lewis in the beginning. They put out, Jerry Lewis took out his own tape recorder, and so did George C. Scott in the beginning. They said, because they kept saying they get screwed by the press.
Right.
It's fine with me if you use your own tape recorder, as long as I can use mine. That's okay. I'm not going to screw. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
But I will edit it in a way, and you may not like it. Don't tell them that. But but the only one that really was offensive was Robert Mitchum. And that was because I had gone to see him for a Playboy interview, and he just said, nah, he was not nice. We went into his room. He was making that championship season, the movie, and we go into his private trailer, and he doesn't offer me a drink. He has a drink. He has a sandwich, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm trying to make small talk and whatever, and we're just meeting, and he didn't care about anything. And I would say, look, I said, when I was with Brando, he didn't give a shit. When I was with Pacino, whatever I said, I was just naming names to say, look, I've talked to these people. I can talk to you. But that none of that he cared about. And finally I said, look, Bob, or Mr. Mitchum, I probably said, what if I just give you if we do 1 hour on tape, and if you don't like my questions, if you feel uncomfortable with me, I will give you that tape, and we won't do anything, and I won't write about it. But let's at least try, to get it started, because I could see that he was very recalcitrant. And he said, well, that's the problem, isn't it? I said, what is that? He says, it's the first hour. I don't want to do the first hour. I said, right. So then I finally said, Mr. Mitchum, I don't know what to say. I said, I'm only doing my job. And he said, well, that's what Eichmann said. I said, excuse me? He says, yeah, that's what Eichmann said. I said, are you comparing doing this Playboy interview with what Adolf Eichmann did to the Jews?
Right.
He said, same thing. Same thing. Well, I stood up. I said, Mr. Mitchum, the publicist knows how to get in touch with me if you do want to talk. And nice meeting you. And I walked out. And I was really, I never walked out before about anyone, but I didn't know what to say with this guy. And I went to Anna Strasberg's house because I was meeting Al Pacino for lunch or something. Or, I don't know by that time what time it was. But so I was down, but I went and he said, what's the matter? I said, nothing. No, what happened? What happened with Mitchum? And I told him, I said, I walked out. And he said, and he said, that son of a bitch. Hey, he doesn't even know who you are. You've talked to politicians. You've talked to, and he was very positive. I mean, he sort of lifted me back up. It was a moment of being, like feeling I failed. Even though there was nothing I felt I could do, it was that. And ironically, then when the Hustons came along and I wrote to Mitchum about wanting to interview him for Heaven Knows Mr. Allison and something else, 2 movies that he did with John, and John loved him. He responded, and I went to his house, and he gave me a very good interview, but we never talked about the Playboy thing. I don't even know if he remembers it.
Maybe he was more comfortable because it wasn't about him. I wonder with the Hustons.
It might have been.
Yeah.
But it was about him too. It was about him dealing with.
Well, true. Yeah. Right.
Getting with fights and all the things that happened. But no, that was memorable because it was so terrible.
Oh no, God, yeah. That's I know I read that in your book, and I noticed that you even said it now, like, well, you felt like you had failed. I mean, wasn't he the one who failed you? I mean,
I can't. No, I mean, look, people like that don't want to be interviewed. Robert De Niro, he didn't want to be interviewed. He felt he was forced into it by his, because movies were starting to cost so much money that they put it in the contract of some of the stars that
to do press.
You have to publicize the book somehow, or the movie. And so, so I went to see him, but boy, that was pulling teeth. I saw him 7 different times, and he would always look at his watch, and if they're not, I said, I got to go. I said, where are you going? Every time I'm with you, you're leaving. And he said, I'm meeting some friends. I said, but you're Robert De Niro. Your friends can wait. Don't you realize what we're doing here? I said, whatever we're doing I'm going to be writing about it. You're going to leave. You're the White Rabbit. You always got a very important date, but not with me. And I wrote that, and Playboy put it in a cell, like the white, I felt like the White Rabbit.
Yeah.
He didn't like it. I saw him afterwards a couple of times.
He called you He called you Judas, right?
Judas. He said, Judas.
Oh, God.
You could have done my book, he said. I said, Bob, you're never going to do a book.
Yeah. Was he one of your most disappointing subjects?
No, because I think the interview turned out to be a pretty good interview. It's about that.
But just the experience of it was
I mean,
fun.
Look,
yeah.
He didn't become a friend. You know what I mean? Pacino became a friend. That there's differences. Elliot Gould became a friend. Certain people you hit it off with. Dolly Parton, we hit it off terrifically until she found out
Manson.
Charlie Manson.
Are you still mad at her about that?
I'm not mad at her. I don't know if she's still mad at me. I mean, she just, I had lunch with her about it some years later. And I said, Dolly, we haven't talked in 4 or 5 years. Is it because of this Manson thing? Which the Manson thing is very simple. I was asked to do Charlie Manson for Playboy. I said, I'll think about it because, I live up in the area that he lived in. And I asked all my friends, the guys all said, do it. The girls all said, don't. And Dolly Parton, out of the blue, just called me and never really called me very often. And it was a Saturday night. And she said, I just remember, she says, hey, Guy, it's Dolly. She says, how you doing? I said, Dolly, it's funny you called. I said, I'm about to make a decision. She says, what about what? And I said, oh, Charlie Manson. She just said, if you talk to him, have you talked to him? I said, no. She says, you're a very sensitive guy. If you talk to him, if you have anything to do with him, his evil will rub off on you. And I don't want that anywhere near me. So I will never talk to you again if you do it. I said, Dolly, you just made my decision. Changed my mind. I mean, I was going to do it. I said, okay, I won't do it. And even though I didn't do it, I didn't see Dolly for a long time. And then finally, when we had lunch, I said, it's the Manson thing, isn't it? She says, I just can't get over that you would even consider it. She come, you know what I mean? It was like that. And I'm surprised. I said, Dolly, I said, it's my life. I've been, I talk to people. If I could have done Mussolini or Hitler, I wanted to do Idi Amin in Uganda when Idi Amin was going like nuts. And I said to Playboy, let's do Idi Amin. And they said no, because they said they didn't think I'd be safe. So I said, let's release it to the New York Times. Let's tell the New York Times so they can put it out there that I've got this interview with Idi Amin. So, maybe that would help me being in the public eye that, I'll be safer. And the Playboy's editor said, do you think that Idi Amin cares if it's in the public, people know or not? If you ask him the wrong thing and he wants to imprison you or he wants to cut off your head, what are you going to do? What are we going to do?
Right.
So I feel we should have done it anyway, but but I didn't. But I wanted to. You know what I mean? That's the nature of this business. It's not all just talking about happy celebrities. You want to talk to people who are shaping the world. I would talk to Donald Trump tomorrow if he would talk, but I want to talk to him. I don't want him to kick me out after the third question. Do
you think you could have got into his psyche?
A little bit, yeah. Well, don't forget, Donald Trump, his psyche is on his shoulders. His ego is so great. He didn't hide what he felt, right? He just went out and said what he was doing, right?
Right.
I got a letter from Kim Jong-un and we fell in love, right? I mean, crazy stuff came out of his mouth.
Oh, I know. Oh, God. But I imagine you would have tried to get him to admit some mistakes or something along those lines. Well, that would have been maybe impossible. I don't know.
No, look, this is a man there's a thing about celebrity. I always felt that they don't know how to apologize. They can do.
Oh yeah, you said that in the art of the interview, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, so and it's basically true as far as all the celebrities I've ever dealt with. I've had one celebrity apologize, and that was Anthony Hopkins, who wanted to do Play My Brando thing, and he didn't do it. And then he called me later on after he made The Wolfman to say, I'm terribly sorry I didn't tell you what. I said, there's no way Anthony Hopkins is calling me to apologize. So, a year later, something else is going on. And I figured what's going on is he's still interested in the script, but he doesn't want to admit it, So I said, Anthony, I haven't shown it to anybody else. Oh, no, that's not why I called. That's not why I called. But let's have lunch. Let's have lunch tomorrow. Okay, we had lunch, and he was back in for, Anyway, long story on that one. But I don't remember why I started talking about apologies, but you asked me something.
Oh, from Trump. We were talking about Trump.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, whether you could get him to admit some things he did wrong.
Trump has never apologized about anything. That's his nature. And he's like that. He's in that celebrity category greatly. And he's got an ego that's unbelievable. I would just play to his ego. I would have him telling me how great he is over and over and over again until he was sick and tired of talking about it. If it's possible to get Trump to be tired of himself, I would be on my way to a decent interview, because that's what you do. That's what you gotta do.
That's the only way.
Tell me
Did
about
you?
your daddy now. Tell me about your mommy. Tell
Yeah.
me about your cousins who hate you.
Did you find when people interviewed him, they were just trying to, get into a fight, so it was good to watch on TV later? Like, why didn't anyone try to do that, do you think?
He didn't give them
The
the time
time.
of day.
Yeah.
No, Trump. What he didn't have to. He made the rules. When you're president, you make the rules. That's just the way it is. You don't want to talk to somebody, get out of here. You want to fire
Right.
someone, I mean, the power of that office is enormous. And
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and they can walk out any time. A politician is a very hard person to get to reveal himself truly.
Mm.
They're used to evasion. That's what they are. That's what That's
Yeah.
what they do. They evade.
That's their whole profession, unfortunately. What would you have asked Charlie Manson?
Oh, Manson would. I read a lot of the books.
Yeah.
It's Manson. You can't predict what you might have asked somebody like him, because Manson had his days where he was crazy, and you saw that. Where he would just go off in court and whatever, and then I'm sure he had his days when he was very reflective. And so, Manson would be a day-to-day kind of situation where you would, if he was in crazy mode, you'd probably go along with it. Whatever he's crazy about, be crazy about it. Whenever he's reflective, you get into certain subjects that you'd want to talk to. But of course, most of his time was spent in prison, in jail, when he was young as well. So he had a perspective that was different. The idea of being free, and then becomes this guru-like figure to these women. It's quite something in a way. So I would try to develop all of that. O.J. Simpson, Playboy asked me when O.J. Simpson got out, they had negotiated with him to do an interview. And I was asked, they didn't even want to tell me it was OJ. They said, "Do you have a current passport?" I said, "Yeah." Okay. Do you think you could be prepared to go to Bermuda, at a moment's notice? I said, "Well, it just depends." I said, "You're asking me to go somewhere without preparing? I do have to know what we're talking about here." And it's OJ, and OJ had agreed to do it, but he wanted, and I don't know the number now, it was either $75,000 or $750,000. And Christy Hefner said, "We're not paying him anything. If he does the interview, we do the interview, but we're not giving him a dime." And so that one didn't happen. But I was the one that would have done it. So I would have done Manson. I would have done OJ.
Oh my God. This I like this story you told about Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell.
How this falling out you had. But do you ever think that some people are just afraid to be confrontational? Like when that story came out and you didn't hear from them, do you think maybe they were just afraid to confront you? Sometimes people, we talked about that earlier, just too afraid to have it out.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think they were afraid. I think they were disappointed. What happened simply was this. I wrote this article about Kurt for Entertainment Weekly when it was new. The first one I did was with Al Pacino, and the second story I did for them was a cover story was on Kurt Russell. Kurt, Goldie, and I were very friendly. They gave us their house to stay in on the beach. My kids, we exchanged dinners. They came to our house. We went to their house every 3 months or so, or we went out, whatever. So we had a very good relationship, and I considered a real friendship. Kate Hudson was young, and Oliver was young. They were kids, and so we would sit around and talk. But then I do this article about Kurt, and I give it to Entertainment Weekly, and they send me back a galley. I go over it and send it back. This is like Time Inc. kind of publication. So they have a lot of editors go through all the stuff. Anyway, they took a picture, they put it on the cover, and the article comes out. And in the second and third paragraph, it said something like, Kurt, who is a B actor, trying to become an A-listed actor, and on and on and on about that, his failures. I never even think in terms of A and B actor. I didn't, but I didn't write either of those paragraphs. I didn't write them. So it went from the first paragraph back to the fourth paragraph that I wrote. And this stuff is right there. Well, when Kurt read it and Goldie, they obviously said, well, why would Larry say that, right? My feeling, and I said to my wife, oh, I don't think they're going to like that. I'm going to hear from them, but, I never did hear from them. So when it came our time to get together, I called them and left a message at their house. They'd call back. I called again. 3 times I called. I said, well, they're not talking to us. Must be the article. But I wasn't sure. Could have been, my wife said, because we didn't open their house correctly, so the alarm went off, and the guy, I had to I couldn't remember the password.
Oh, right, yeah.
Anyway, but I said, nah, that's not, they can't get mad at that. Nothing happened. We got in, whatever. But, okay. So finally, Al Pacino was at one of the Golden Globes or Oscars thing, and he came back, and I was at his house, and he said, oh, I met your friends of yours. Your friend. I said, who'd you meet? He says, Goldie and Kurt. I said, I don't think they're my friends anymore. He says, well, why not? I said, I don't know. He says, what do you mean you don't know? I said, well, it could have been this. It could be that. I said, I never heard from them. You have to find out. He says, you can't let something like that go. I said, Al, he said, I want you to write Goldie one more time. Promise me you're going to do this, he says. And just say that started saying that I said to you that you have to write this to. And blah, blah. So I said, all right, since I said it. So I did. I wrote it one more time. I said, Goldie, I wouldn't be bothering you now because but Al Pacino just told me he saw you guys and he insisted that I write to you. So I'm writing. I don't know why we're not talking, but for some reason, something happened. So she wrote me back and said, when that article came out, she says, I didn't recognize Kurt. I didn't recognize the guy that I'm with. And I thought that we knew each other well enough that you would never have written that. So I didn't know what to say. I was shocked, and Kurt was hurt. And so I wrote back. And she was in, I think, Hawaii at the time or something. So I wrote back, and I got my article out, and I Xeroxed it, the 17 pages that I had written. And I said, I know, and I said, I know you haven't kept that article. You hate it, so I understand that. But I want to give you the article that I wrote. And I'm sending a copy of the article that was in print. And the sections that upset you, I never wrote. This is not an excuse. My name is on the article, but this is the way it works sometimes. I have not written again for Entertainment Weekly because of it. This happened to me with Rolling Stone once, and I stopped writing for them. But how many magazines do I stop writing for until I can't make a living? If this happens, what could you do?
Yeah.
But I explained it. And she wrote back on very fancy paper and stuff. She says, I'm down on my knees, she says, in apology. Your article is so beautiful. That's Kurt. You got him. And I'm so sorry, let's have dinner. Let's get together. I said, oh God, I knew it was over. I knew it didn't matter what we did. Because when something like that happens, I was angry now, that they didn't challenge me. Why didn't you call? Why didn't you answer my phone and just say, listen, we're upset with you. You never should have wrote that article. We don't want to talk to you. Okay.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. There was just silence. So I said, well, that means we weren't really friends. See, that's the thing, is that you think that you have these friendships with people, and because everything's going along great, something like that happens, they don't look, they're not your friend anymore. Well, screw that, Anyway, she invited us for dinner, and we went. And my wife says, are you going to bring it up? I said, of course I'm going to bring it up, but we'll do it at the right time. So we're sitting around the dinner now, and Oliver and Kate were still young. They were there, and, we're sitting, eating at her house. And Kurt says, I owe you an apology, something like that. I said, Kurt, let's not talk about it over dinner. Let's, the kids here and all that stuff. Let's just have a nice dinner, talk about anything else. We'll talk about it, after dinner. And we did, then we sat down and I told him how I felt. And, I said, it's unforgivable in a way, what you did, it's hurtful and, blah, blah, blah. And this is what friends do. But, anyway, they thought, oh no, everything's good now. We're going to be great. We hugged, we kissed, blah, blah, blah. That was it. I didn't see Goldie again until I ran into her at CAA. Oops, almost lost you. And
that's okay. Yeah.
That was that. So yeah.
Why was that?
I write point about it in my YouTube book.
So why do you think?
You?
No, I'm good. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can.
You're good.
Look at that. See, we've been talking for almost 2 hours. That's what.
I can hear you. Okay.
Sign offs.
Oh, you can't hear? Can you not hear me anymore? Oh, you might. Okay. I'll give you. You can't hear me, eh?
I can't hear you.
Okay.
But
hang on. Oh, and there he goes. Okay. I'll give Larry a second. Maybe he can come back on. We talked for almost 2 hours. I was going to ask him if he was getting tired. Hold on. Maybe this is him. There he is.
I just moved my background. I'm putting this. I thought I would power up with maybe that will help.
Did your internet just freeze up?
I don't know. How do you know it wasn't yours?
Yeah, or mine, I should say. Mine or yours. I didn't mean to put the blame on you.
Something happened. All right, now you have now you say, what's that background? It's a different thing, but
yeah.
Is that all right? Or you want me to go back to the other thing?
No, you're fine. Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Yeah, that happens every now and then with the live streams.
We're losing it.
Oh.
See, you're frozen and I'm not, so I think it's your side. So
that's weird because I can see you perfectly. Hang on a second.
You have to sign off. You have to figure out a way to end this thing by saying, "Thank you very much." I really enjoyed you talking. I'm sorry that I cut you off, but you talked for so goddamn long. It's enough already.
That's what I was gonna do.
You're going for dinner now.
That's what I was gonna do actually, and then but then you came back.
Do it now. Do it now.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Okay. Yeah. Well, you know what? I had a lot more planned, but I lost him again. I'll sign off from here. I'll have to have Larry back because I had about 20 questions left or something. I mean, the man's had such a life and career that we could talk for hours. Oh, there he is again. I'll try him again.
There
I was doing the sign off there, but I was just saying I had about 20 more questions, but since it's already been a couple hours, maybe if you're interested, Larry, you could come back sometime soon.
I'll be happy to finish your questions if you like. How many people do you think are going to watch this thing? About 12?
No, a lot,
right.
Because the YouTube, it's there's certain not to go too into it. There's keywords, there's ways that you can get it out there. But I had a lot of interest about this on social media. I've been plugging in a lot. So we'll make this part 1 of 2 because I had a lot left.
By the way, I mean, can you make this into 2 parts so people don't have to watch for 2 hours? They can watch and then see it again, or this just once you click, that's it, you're in.
Well, you can. It's a bit tricky with YouTube because then they leave this video and then they put the one you edited and then you have to delete one and then you lose the fact that people were the watch time that you get. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a little what you could do is end, and then when we do it again, will have another link. It's like reading a book. You stop and go back. Well, thanks. Well, Larry, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time, and I've been really enjoying your books. And like I said, if anyone who's a writer or a podcaster or interviewer or journalist, this is a Bible right here. I've certainly learned a lot from reading The Art of the Interview, and many of Larry's great books and great stories. If this is your first time on my podcast, please consider subscribing. Right beside the description box, you'll see the subscribe button. Click on that, and then you can click the bell, and then you'll get a notification every time I release a new video or I go live like today. And I'm also on MoPfi TV, which is an entertainment app, which you can get for free. And the link is in the description box below to where you can get that. So Larry, thanks so much. I'll be in touch. We'll have you back on again for my other 40, 50 questions.
Okay, Robert. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Larry. Talk soon.